Hey, with Easter coming up, I wanted to take a few quick moments and discuss something about the proof of the resurrection and the proving the case that Jesus rose from the dead. So, real quick, I'm going to look at this from a proving the case standpoint, from a historical standpoint, hopefully, and look at some of the facts that actually exist out there. So, to be able to prove that there's a resurrection, you have to be able to prove that there was a true and an actual death first. And then to be able to prove that somebody actually died, you have to prove that they actually lived. So, this hopefully will be a quick three-part series. And this is part one. And what proof is there that Jesus actually did live, in fact, walk the earth? Going back, and you have to look at the first century, how do we prove that anybody existed in the first century? Whether we're talking about historical figures or Caesar, or going back beyond that, pharaohs. How do we prove that any of those people existed? The historical findings back then are based on usually religious writings and governmental records. So we'll look at religious records, and we'll look at at what the Romans said about it. Religiously, we know that the Christians say that Jesus existed. You've got the New Testament accounts of him walking and talking and speaking to people. What about other religions that are based on that time and that area? Islam. Islam says that Jesus existed. The Quran mentions that Jesus existed and was a prophet of Allah. The Jews say Jesus existed. The Jews say Jesus walked the earth and was a teacher and had followers and said he was the Messiah. However, they go beyond that to say this is why he can't be the Messiah. And I want to bring that up. If the Jews go and make their case that because of A, B, and C, he cannot be the Messiah, why not just say he didn't exist if he didn't exist? The reason is because he did exist, or the Jews say he existed, and this is why he can't be the Messiah. So outside of religion, what about governmental records? The Romans say that he existed. Letters at that time in the Roman Empire between people discussing modern topics mention a man named Jesus who was the founder of Christianity. The Roman historian Tacitus, who did not like Christians, who did not like Christianity, was not a follower of it, in fact spoke very ill of it, mentions their founder being a man named Christus, who was put to death by Pilate. So we have the governmental side of it. Pagans at that time, who again were trying to disprove Christianity and trying to discredit Christianity, mention their founder Jesus being a practicer of magic. So again, if they're trying to discredit Christianity, why have to discredit someone who never existed? The reason is because the pagans say he existed. The pagans knew that he existed. So you've got the Roman account, you've got all the major religions from that time that say he existed. The government says he existed. The pagans, people who didn't like him, say he existed. What about historical accounts? Well, we talked about the Roman historian Tacitus, who is looked upon for capturing and for a lot of Roman history at that time. He says Jesus existed. Also, the first century historian Josephus, who is very well regarded as being an accurate historian at that time, mentions Jesus and the existence of Jesus. In fact, one of the times that he mentions him, I think it's important to bring out, he's not actually referring to Jesus. Josephus is telling a story or a historical account about James, who's the brother of Jesus. And the way he references James is Jesus, whom they called Christ, his brother James. Then he goes on to tell this story. So this scholarly historian mentions Jesus. There's a man named Bart Ehrman, Ehrman, who is a agnostic secular scholar. He makes this statement that he certainly existed, as virtually every competent scholar agrees. Now, so if he existed, if he was there in the presence, and I've heard some people say, I've heard accounts that, well, he was a spirit, he was an apparition, he was an angel that was sent to comfort God's people. What is said about him actually being a man? Well, if you look at the New Testament accounts, they mention things that only living people do. He ate, he drank, he slept, he got tired, he got hungry, he got upset, he cried, he bled. He did all these things that humans do. In addition, all these other people who say Christianity is a fraud, he wasn't of God, he was merely a man, say he existed. in the form of a man. They say he was a man. Going beyond that, even after Jesus's death and Jesus being out of the picture, John, the same one who wrote the Gospel of John, in a letter to an early church, which is 1 John in the New Testament, mentions Jesus and says, we saw him, we heard him speak, and we touched him. Again, a physical body. Thank you all. Next installment, video 2, we will look at the proof of the actual death. So thank you and happy Easter.